My wife, Katie, knew that I planned to retire as soon as I could, which was around the age of 61. We often discussed it, including moving somewhere away from the cold northeastern winters. Even though she was almost 12 years younger than me, I always assumed she would retire with me. The investments I had made throughout my career would have provided us with a comfortable life for the rest of our days. You can imagine how shocked I was when she announced that she had never planned to retire with me. I remember yelling, "What the hell, Kathy? We talked about traveling when I retire." "We talked about your travels when you retired. You weren't listening to me. What a shock." Before I went to the bar down the street, the situation had gotten worse. We hadn't spoken in over a week, and I was trying to figure out what to do next. A friend gave me a copy of Bill Bryson's A Walk in the Woods. I also watched the movie. I knew what I was going to do. After a few hours of research and spending a fortune at REI, I started with day hikes and then moved on to overnight hikes. Somehow I managed to survive, despite stumbling into a wasp nest and falling down a hill. I talked to Katie about hiking the Appalachian Trail. She made me watch the movie Wild with Reese Witherspoon and told me I should enjoy my retirement. The following March, when Katie came home from work, I was loading my Jeep to head to Georgia. "How long will you be gone, Jack?" "Judging by the way you're packing, you'll be gone for months." "I told you, Katie, it's a 2,200-mile route. It'll take several months. Look who's not listening. I've told you many times. I even gave you Bill Bryson's book about the route. You didn't read it or watch the movie like I suggested." "Hiking is your hobby, Jack. Why would I read a book or watch a movie about it? When are you planning to leave?" "I'm waiting for a package from Amazon. It should arrive tomorrow. I plan to leave the next day." Katie gave me a look that said she was unhappy with me and went into the house. She didn't come out of our bedroom for dinner, but I could hear her watching A Walk in the Woods. In the morning, she came down to my office for coffee. "I think you're crazy, Jack. At least Bryson had someone to go hiking with. You've never gone that far. And the last time you went on an overnight hike, you came home with more than a dozen bee stings and countless bruises from falling down a hill. But I'm much smarter now, Kathy." "You're a damn fool, Jack. You got the kids all excited about your crazy idea behind my back. They were so excited about your plans. I hope you have a good time, and don't forget to update your insurance and will before you leave." That was the last time I spoke to Katie. I created a group chat so Katie and the kids would know where I was. Katie insisted that I remove her from the chat. A few days later, I found myself on Springer Mountain, where the AT began. Katie's behavior ruined my mood for the first few days, but there were dozens of people like me around, starting their journey with hope in their eyes, and it was contagious. I spent my nights in shelters along the trail and nearby. I usually slept in a tent, but sometimes, if there was a bad storm, I would spend the night in a shelter. But there was always a group of people in the shelters, having dinner or drinking morning coffee at the picnic tables. It turned out that you spend several dinners with the same group of people, some of whom walk faster and go further. I enjoyed the camaraderie and stopped worrying about Katie's feelings. The AT was a tough test, both physically and mentally. I went to bed with my legs throbbing with pain, knowing that tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and the day after that would be the same. When I left Georgia and entered North Carolina, I wanted to do a cartwheel until I realized I still had 2,000 miles to go. In the Smoky Mountains, a woman was attacked by a bear, which really knocked me down, and Katie's stupid words echoed in my head again. Cell service was poor, but I tried to post photos on Facebook as often as possible. I really liked the comments I received. Katie never commented or liked any of my photos. The trail wound its way between Tennessee and North Carolina for another 300 miles. I was sure that some parts of my body would never recover. One night, a violent storm broke out. I think it was in Tennessee. The temperature dropped to -6 degrees, and my sleeping bag was only rated for -0 degrees. The wind was blowing against my tent, and it was impossible to sleep. In the morning, the situation hadn't improved. The trail was covered with snow, and the wind had plastered the trees with wet snow, covering the white markers that marked the trail. Maybe Katie was right. I was being incredibly stupid. I struggled up and down the slopes, hoping I was still on the trail, and couldn't get the thought of giving up out of my head. If I had a cell phone, I would have called one of the many shuttle drivers to come and rescue me. When I finally got a signal, I texted a woman named Hiking Ginger, whom I had met on the trail when I was in the Smoky Mountains. She was from North Dakota and tended to look at things differently. I told her I was thinking about giving up. She replied, "Never give up on a bad day." Hiking Ginger is a nickname she gave herself because of her bright red hair. I could imagine her saying it. We became friends because we were about the same age, unlike the students who made up the majority of the other hikers. As if by magic, when I read her message, the sky cleared, the sun came out, and the temperature rose 20 degrees. After walking only 10 miles, I stopped at the nearest shelter and hung my tent up to dry. Thoughts of giving up were still swirling in my head as I dozed on the picnic table and imagined what it would be like. First on my list was seeing Katie, happy, rubbing her hands together and telling me I was a damn fool. But then what? I didn't start this trip because I was happy at home. The thought of sitting around waiting for Katie to come home so we could watch TV, staring at our phones, scared me to death. The next morning, after a good night's sleep, I set out with renewed determination. The kids cheered me on as I told them about my trials and tribulations of the previous day. Sometimes I took a day off, booked a hotel room for the night, washed off the stench, and did my laundry. I did the same in the next town, and a hot shower had never felt so good. I bought a shoe dryer at Walmart and set out the next day with dry boots. At the next shelter where I stayed, Ginger was there. I expected her to be a week ahead of me. "Hi, Ginger," I said, dropping my backpack. "I thought you left a few weeks ago." Ginger, one of the happiest people on the trail, looked at me, and I thought she was going to cry. I sat down next to her, she hugged me, and she did cry. We were friends on the trail, but this kind of physical closeness was unexpected. Finally, she calmed down enough to let go of my neck. "I just got back from North Dakota. My husband told me he was divorcing me, so I flew home to try to save our marriage. He said it was too late and that he had found someone else. The only thing I have left is hiking, so I flew back here. I'll have to go home for a week or two to pick up my things and put them in storage until I finish my hike." I tried to say a few comforting words, but nothing came to mind. The conversation turned to other topics important to travelers: encounters with bears, the availability of water, how many people I had seen. I wondered if my marriage was heading in the same direction and what that would look like. Ginger and I traveled the same way we had in the Smoky Mountains. I would set out on the trail in the morning, she would catch up with me around noon, and every evening we would set up camp near the same shelter. She never mentioned her husband again, but I couldn't help asking her about it the night before she left for the storage facility. She said, "I'm sad that it's over, but I'm in a place I love, doing what I love with wonderful people. I'm not going to let that jerk ruin it." By the time she returned to the trail, I was several weeks ahead of her, but she was determined to catch up. McAfee Knob is probably the most famous spot on the Appalachian Trail. I was a week away from it when I received a notice from my lawyer that Katie was divorcing me. If I had been even slightly smarter, I would have seen it coming. I left the trail and checked into a hotel, where Katie's lawyer handed me the divorce papers. I contacted a lawyer I knew from my son's baseball team. He agreed to represent me, but I had no idea how good he was. I just wanted to get it over with and didn't want to leave the trail. It took Katie and me a week to agree on the divorce terms. My lawyer said her offer might seem unfair to me, but it was well within the norm. I told him that if I didn't have to go home, I didn't care, and I wasn't even interested in why she wanted a divorce. Out of spite, I mailed her my wedding ring and returned to the trail. When I reached the summit of McAfee, I was still angry, but all my anger evaporated. There were a lot of day hikers and other people at the summit, and they took pictures of me sitting on top. I posted the photos on Facebook and was very pleased with the comments. That evening, I had just pitched my tent when hiking Ginger threw her backpack next to mine. She was surprised that she had caught up with me so quickly. I had to stay in Petersburg for a few days to take care of some things at home. Do those things explain why you're not wearing your engagement ring anymore? Why aren't you such an observant traveler? I asked with a smile. I'm sorry, Snapshot. You don't seem very upset. Not as upset as I was and still am. As someone much wiser than me once said, I'm sad about the end, but I'm in a place I love, doing what I love, with wonderful people. I'm not going to let that jerk ruin my life. Besides, today I climbed McAfee Knob. I was on top of the world. Ginger and I traveled as we always did. I would leave before her in the morning. She would catch up with me around noon, and every evening we would set up camp near the same shelter. She would join me when I stayed at a hotel. Once she told me she didn't have money for a hotel and would go to a hostel. I had never stayed in a hostel and had heard many terrible stories. There is a funny scene about hostels in the book Walk in the Woods. Ginger, a room with 2 single beds costs the same as I was going to pay for a room with 1 large bed. I'll book 2 rooms if you don't mind sharing. You're joking, right? I can't feel safe sharing a room with you. We've been sleeping next to each other in the middle of the woods for weeks. Are you sure you don't mind sacrificing your privacy? I assured her that everything was fine, but it wasn't my personal life that was bothering me. Perhaps for the first time I saw Ginger clean and without her camping clothes. She came out of the bathroom wearing pajamas that came down to her mid-thighs, but the light from the bathroom made them transparent. When we returned to the trail, Ginger overtook me more and more often. One evening, we arrived at the shelter at the same time. At dinner, I said, I've always been afraid that I was slowing you down. You're usually much faster than me, Ginger. You're not slower than me. You just stop more often to admire the view and smell the roses, and I had to do that all the time. You're also much more efficient than I am in the morning. I'm picking up some of your tricks. Will you wait for me tomorrow? Of course, I replied. As soon as I finished, our phones rang with a message about an extreme weather situation. Strong winds, heavy rain, thunderstorms, and possible tornadoes. We went to check the shelters, most of which were in acceptable condition, with a few leaks in the roof. It was one of the worst shelters I had ever seen. There were many holes in the roof, and there were large gaps between the logs through which the wind blew and the rain penetrated. We decided that our tents were the best option. As soon as I zipped up my tent, the sky opened up and I felt like I was in a drum as the raindrops hit the tent. It was impossible to sleep, and then I heard Ginger ask if she could come in. I unzipped the tent and she fell inside. She said that the place where she had pitched her tent had turned into a lake. All her things were soaked, and she was wet to the skin. We were both traveling in 2-person tents, but one was very cramped. I had a spare set of hiking clothes in my backpack, and I turned away as she took off her clothes and changed into what I gave her. The rain stopped, and we fell asleep to the pleasant sound of raindrops on the roof. In the morning, I woke up with Ginger's head on my chest and her leg wrapped around my thigh. I watched her sleep peacefully, and then she started to stir. She woke up, looked at me, and froze in surprise. I'm sorry, Jack. I don't remember invading your personal space. It was hard to keep from laughing, especially since she had called me Jack for the first time instead of my nickname. Oh, don't worry, Helen. I'll be laughing about this for a long time. She playfully slapped me on the chest, and we stepped out of the tent. I'll never understand how they can call this a 2-person tent. Ginger's tent was flooded with 3 inches of water, and all our things were wet. We started pulling things out and hanging them on a clothesline we made from the rope we had brought with us. Her sleeping bag was the worst of it. In the end, we spread it out on the picnic table, hoping it would dry. The extra weight meant we couldn't continue the hike until her things were at least a little dry. Water is damn heavy. She wanted me to leave without her, but I refused. It was 10 miles to where I had left the Jeep, and by noon we realized we would have to spend another night in my tent. At dinner, Ginger Helen looked very depressed. I'm sorry to ask, but could you share your tent with me again tonight? Helen, if we were in your place, wouldn't you share your tent with me? Of course, Jack. I'm ashamed I was so stupid and pitched the tent there. Let's plan tomorrow. Hopefully we can get to my Jeep and then to a hotel where we can go to the laundromat and really dry your clothes. Sounds good, Jack. Depending on how long it takes to get to the Jeep, we may need 2 nights at the hotel, and I won't bother you tonight. But that was the best part of my night. At midnight, we headed for my tent. When we got inside, Helen decided she wanted to use the bathroom first, which gave me a chance to change into my pajamas. Helen was wearing a nightgown that had dried during the day. Maybe she was teasing me, but when she climbed over me, it felt like she was rubbing against me on purpose. We slept in my sleeping bag again. I wasn't asleep yet when she laid her head on my chest and wrapped her legs around mine. As she fell asleep, she murmured, "I'm sorry, Jack." The next day, we made it to my SUV, most of Helen's clothes still wet, which added at least 15 pounds to her backpack. On the way to the hotel, we stopped for dinner and then went to Walmart to buy a few things. Helen wanted another pair of pajamas and underwear. I took another shower and lay in bed, writing something on Facebook, when Helen came out of the bathroom. She stood in the doorway until she caught my attention. These pajamas were much shorter than the other ones. The straps were much more revealing, and her breasts were much more noticeable than in the other ones. I sat there staring at her. "Do you like it, Jack?" "Yes, Helen, you might be cold in that on the trail." "It's getting warmer, maybe even too warm for something more. Do you mind if I sleep with my head on your shoulder again? I slept better last night than I ever have." I mumbled, "Okay," and she quickly climbed under the blanket, laid her head on my shoulder, and wrapped her leg around mine. "Someone shaved their legs today?" "Yes, they were almost as hairy as yours. Much better now, right?" Helen stroked my leg, moving higher and higher. It was well past midnight, and we both fell asleep quickly. I woke up with Helen's head on my chest. She was awake and smiling. "I hope I didn't make you do anything you didn't want to do, Jack." "Not at all, Helen. Let's buy a tent for 3. You don't want to sleep so close to me?" "Oh, trust me, I do. That way we'll have more room when we get dressed and maybe a sleeping bag for 2. Helen looked at me disappointedly and sat down. "I don't have money for all that, Jack. I can barely feed myself until we get to Maine. It's not fair that you have to pay for all these extra things." "Okay. Then sell me your sleeping bag and tent, and we'll use that money to cover your share of the new expenses." She smiled. "You know what that means? Every time I want to go camping, I'll have to sleep with you." "I'd like that." We took showers, went to breakfast to eat real eggs, then to the laundromat, and then to the local camping store. We didn't need 2 tents, 2 sleeping bags, and 2 stoves, so we ended up lighter than we were when we started. Helen was worried that something might separate us, so we left the extra stuff in my car to make her feel more comfortable. Back on the trail, we quickly realized that even in a tent for 3, having sex was almost impossible, especially after a long and hard hike. We were both disappointed, but I was happy to sleep with Helen in my arms. Katie used to sleep like that, but it had been so long. The thought crossed my mind the next morning when I realized Helen was looking at me. She sat up. She was short enough to do so. "What are you thinking about, Jack? I can see what you're thinking about. Please tell me, did I do something to upset you?" There was a strange fear in her eyes. I kissed her. "I was thinking about how my ex used to sleep, hugging me like you do, and wondering when it ended, and promising myself I wouldn't let it happen again. I love you, redhead tourist." She kissed me passionately. "I love you, Snapshot." "Yes, but I said it first." "But who started the sex? Ha!" We had a great time on the trip, mostly doing silly things. I was riding on the edge of a cliff, singing the song, "Yeah, Yeah, Yeah," and Helen came up to me with a plastic thing you could write with while standing, and we both rode on the edge of the cliff. We were north of Philadelphia when I got a message from my lawyer saying I needed to get my things out of the house because it had been sold. Anything left in 2 weeks would be auctioned off or donated to Goodwill. Kathy said she was going away for the weekend. I called the kids and told them to take whatever they wanted. Helen and I drove to northeastern Pennsylvania, rented a truck and a storage unit, and started loading my stuff. I didn't need much, and I was throwing old CDs and DVDs in the trash when I heard Katie's voice. "Hi, Helen. I'm Katie. Or should I call you Ginger the Traveler?" Then I heard Helen say, "Oh, Jack." I came out of the office. "Sorry, Katie. I thought you were gone until tomorrow." "Please, calm down, both of you. I wanted to meet Helen, so I stopped by. Helen, I wanted to thank you for coming into Jack's life. I don't know when we drifted apart, but it was obvious to me that it was a serious break. If I had been half as strong as I pretended to be, we could have talked about it like adults, but I didn't. Take care of each other." Katie stood up and left, leaving Helen and me confused and bewildered. That evening, we tried to figure out how she found out. I had been very careful with my Facebook posts, mainly because I wanted to introduce Helen to the children as discreetly as possible. So I simply asked Katie, "I told the boys that I'm divorcing you. They weren't happy and thought I should have waited until you got back from your trip. Our youngest said I was as heartless as one of Dad's hiking friends, Ginger. Her husband told her he was divorcing her while she was on a hike because he had met someone else. But I had already filed for divorce by then. I wanted you to know that Helen's Facebook page is open to everyone. I know you didn't do anything with her before I filed for divorce, and I'm glad you found someone to spend your retirement with." Helen read the letter and insisted that I show her how to block her Facebook account. Before doing so, I looked through her posts. Apparently, my younger son had already done so. Some of her friends asked her if she was afraid someone would attack her at night. She replied that she wasn't, but that she slept better when there were people around who made her feel safe. There were some teasing comments. She mentioned me and said that he was married, and I was sure he would never cheat on his wife. Besides, he never looks at me in a way that almost hurts my pride. There were other posts where I was mentioned. She talked about the night she had to sleep in my tent and how I was the perfect gentleman. Once I started looking through her things, I couldn't stop. She used Messenger to chat with her friend, telling her how she seduced me one night at the hotel and how good she felt the next morning. Helen and I resumed our hike, and everything was going well until it wasn't. Something was off between us. We weren't arguing, but something was wrong. We were in the middle of Vermont, about 600 miles from our destination, and we were making good time. One morning over coffee, I said, "We're not getting along, Helen, and I want to understand why. Let's not rush today. There's a beautiful view about 5 miles from here, and another 5 miles down the road there's a shelter where we can set up camp." "Sounds good, Jack," she replied, but there was no joy in her voice. We sat down on a rock and enjoyed the view, Helen sitting between my legs and snuggling up to me. "I'm sorry, Jack. I usually enjoy the moment and don't worry about what's next. As my pastor says, God gives us as much grace as we need to deal with today's problems. But I have no idea what I'm going to do when we get to the end. Will there be an us after that, and what will it look like?" "I love you, Helen, and I hope there is an us after Mount Katahdin. I never wanted to go on long hikes again, but somewhere deep down, I thought about buying a small trailer, traveling around the country, going on week-long hikes or something like that. Traveling was my goal for retirement." "But that's part of the problem, Jack. I don't have the money for that. Neither I nor my husband ever worked at a job with a pension or a 401k retirement plan. I don't think there are jobs like that in North Dakota. We were grateful to have health insurance. We didn't save for retirement. Everything extra went toward putting the kids through college. No one could live on my Social Security, and I don't want to be a burden on you. Would it be easier if we got married?" Helen continued to stare at the valley. "Don't waste my time, Jack." "I'm not wasting your time. After all, I told you I loved you when we were 1,000 miles apart." After I offered you sex? And now you're asking me to marry you? Before I ask you, I want to know what you'd like to do after we conquer Mount Katahdin. I don't want to bring up Kathy, but when I retired, we were on completely different wavelengths. Well, if money weren't an issue, I'd like to spend the summer traveling around northern Iceland. There's a guy on Facebook who has a map of all the best waterfalls in the country. Imagine us chasing waterfalls. I know the guy you're talking about. He might be my soulmate. But think about marriage, Helen. Think about it carefully. I don't think either of us would survive another divorce. That doesn't solve the problem of our difference in wealth. I don't know how much money you have, but you spend it pretty freely. Are you willing to continue financing the luxurious lifestyle I've been living for the past 3 months? And since we're on the subject of debt and careful consideration, what's that on my back? You know, I love the way you smell after a shower when we stay at a hotel, but not as much as I love the way you smell after 3 days of hiking. Jack, that's the sweetest thing anyone's ever said to me, but I think you're probably crazy. The next morning, Helen looked at me when I opened my eyes. Thank you, Jack. I didn't realize how much yesterday bothered me until we talked. Before I started the AT, I always thought I would go back to my husband, but now that's not an option. You wouldn't believe how much better I feel this morning. But I want you to think carefully about our wedding, especially considering that I'll be financially dependent on you. But we need to go and hope we can make up for yesterday. And then we climbed Katahdin. We had long ago decided that we would be at the summit at the same time, and in the last photo from the trail, we are standing at the top with our arms raised in victory. But Helen came back to climb Katahdin. For a long time, my goal had been to complete the AT, and now that I had achieved it, I was lost. It's like reading a great book, and when you finish, you're lost looking for something else. We spent that night in a hotel, and Helen rocked me to my core. I had always enjoyed our sex, but that night was truly special, and I thought I could get used to it. In the morning, I went to a barber shop to look like a human being again. When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, I saw Helen coming out of the hotel arm in arm with another man, and I watched them get into a car with North Dakota license plates. They drove past me. Maybe she didn't notice me or didn't recognize me in my new look, but she must have recognized my Jeep. When I returned, there was a note in my room. I'm sorry, Jack. My ex begged me to come back to him. I couldn't say no. Meeting you and hiking the trail were some of the best things that ever happened to me. Good luck, Ginger. Her Facebook and Messenger links were still on my tablet, and I opened them. I found messages from her husband begging her to come back. At first she refused, but he said he would wait for her at Katahdin. There was a lot of back and forth, but in the end she agreed the day before we reached the summit. I think last night's sex was a kind of mercy sex. There was nothing interesting on her Facebook page, just our photo at the summit. I was so proud of that photo when I first saw it, and now it seemed like she had disgraced it. Maybe I was being childish, but I removed all the security measures I had set up for her, posted a photo of her Dear Jack letter, and then changed her password. I thought I would be more upset about the letter, but maybe it hadn't sunk in yet. I liked one movie trailer, and since I was staying at the hotel for another night, I started ordering everything I wanted and then planned to go to the factory to pick it all up. Before I met Helen, I had been thinking about going to see the waterfalls, and I saw no reason to change my plans. Then the phone rang. It was Helen. I thought she was angry about her Facebook account, so I didn't answer. As soon as she hung up, I checked my voicemail. Jack, I need your help, and I'll understand if you tell me to go to hell. I'm at the Midland police station. Please pick me up, and I promise I'll disappear from your life. I sent her a text message saying I was on my way. She was standing in front of the police station, her left eye swollen from crying. I was so angry with her, and now I was running from my SUV to her. She had to look into the police station to tell them she was leaving. They gave me an angry look. She got into the SUV and started crying. I'm such an idiot, Jack. I can't believe I let him talk me into going back to him. He hadn't hit me in a long time. I thought he'd changed, or maybe I'd gotten smarter and wasn't giving him a chance. We weren't in the car for 5 minutes before he started getting nervous, and I knew I had to shut up. He cursed and complained about all the problems I had caused him by deciding to go camping and leaving him alone. He had to cook and do the laundry himself, so he found another woman. One day she told him he was an idiot and he hit her, so she called the police. The more he talked, the more I understood why I had decided to go camping in the first place. When we stopped to get gas, he was still ranting about how unfair life was and how I had made his life hell. I went to the ladies' room, realizing what a mistake I had made by leaving you. I had everything, and I traded it for a drunk married man because he was the father of my children. He was filling up the tank when he asked if I was cheating on him with that guy from Snapshot. Dozens of witty responses ran through my head, but he hit me in the face. Then he grabbed my arm, lifted me off the ground, and tried to push me back into the car. Luckily, a police officer saw everything. He ordered my ex to let me go, but he told him to mind his own business and that it wasn't his place to interfere with how a husband disciplines his wife. But my ex let me go and lunged at the officer, who shot him with a stun gun. I don't expect you to take me back. I called my sister. She'll send me money for a ticket home. Helen cried silently for the rest of the 20-minute drive, staring at the windshield. She left all her things behind, and when we got back to the hotel, she grabbed a change of clothes and jumped in the shower. Helen stayed in there so long that I had to go out to the lobby to take a leak. When I came back, she was still in there, and I started to worry. I knocked on the door, opened it slightly, and asked if everything was okay. There was no answer, so I went in. Helen was sitting on the floor of the shower, her head in her hands and her ears covered with her hands. I grabbed a towel, helped her up, and dried her off. She looked like a zombie, except for the tears streaming down her face. It was already past midnight, so I helped her change into her pajamas and put her to bed. After I went to bed, I climbed into Helen's bed, laid her head on my chest, and hugged her legs. I'm sure she cried even harder. Eventually, she calmed down, and we both fell asleep. In the morning, I looked at Helen, and she was looking at me, her hand on my t-shirt, playing with the hair on my chest. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. We lay there for a while, and it seemed like we both fell asleep again. Helen got up to go to the bathroom, then sat on the edge of the bed and stared at me. Why, Jack, why are you so nice to me after I dumped you? Like I've told you 1,000 times, I love you. I was really angry when I read your note. I did some stupid things on your Facebook page, and then I realized you'd left all your things here. And I hoped you'd come back. So you'll just take me back, no yelling, no fighting, no banging on the door and breaking things, just take me back into your arms? That's what I thought if you don't want to be anywhere else. Jack, where I come from, men don't do that. Helen, before we continue this conversation, I want to know what you want. If you want to go home, I'll buy you a bus ticket. But you have to tell me what you want. I want to see the waterfalls with you, Jack. Maybe we can introduce our children along the way. What do you want, Jack? You look at me with fear in your eyes all the time, and I don't want that. I don't think I've ever done anything to make you afraid of me, and I never will. Where I come from, men don't behave like that, and I really want to see the waterfalls with you, and seeing our children is a great idea. But let's eat first, okay?